Hello everyone, I'm Brian. Welcome back. Let's go ahead and continue.
Now, Shankara then has to establish. You can't just say it. You have to show that there is a mistake. Is there really a mistake? Can there be a mistake? So that is the first, the Adhyasa Bhashya. It's the subject matter of the Adhyasa Bhashya. We will, since the time is running out, we should start reading it a little bit. Let's read a little bit. I've given you 3 handouts. One handout is the text of the Adhyasa Bhashya. I think it was study material used by the Chinmay Mission or some organization, but it's nice. It's easily available on the net, so I downloaded it from there. It has, in the first page, there will be some Shanti mantras, some mantras for chanting, but after that, the text of the Adhyasa Bhashya starts, and there is a introduction also. There is a translation. But the translation we will use is the second Arsha Vidya Gurukulam. Yes, that was the text used by the Arsha Vidya Gurukulam. Then there's a second handout, which is an English translation of the Adhyasa Bhashya. And this is taken from Swami Gambhiranandaji's book. Swami Gambhiranji was the 11th president of our order, a great Vedantic scholar, a prolific writer and translator. So he translated the Brahma Sutra commentaries of Shankaracharya, including, of course, the introductory essay, the Adhyasa Bhashya. This is the book. And I well remember this book. This was the first book I borrowed from our ashram library when I became a brahmacharya, a novice. So when I became a monk, I went to the library and I thought, now it's the time to learn Vedanta. So I borrowed the shiniest, biggest book on Vedanta I could find, this book. I was proudly walking away to my room when a monk saw me and he said, "So what are you reading?" And I showed him this book. It's called the Brahma Sutra Bhashya. I didn't know what it was. And the monk said, "Oh, good. You won't understand a word." And I got so scared, I went immediately and returned it to the library. But it's not so difficult. It's difficult, but it's not so difficult. But you need to know a little Vedanta before you dive into this. So the second handout is the Swami Gambhirananda's translation of the Adhyasa Bhashya, the first portion of this Brahma Sutra Bhashya. And the third handout is an extensive commentary on the Adhyasa Bhashya by one of the greatest living Pandits, scholars of Vedanta in the world today, Mani Dravid Shastri. He is a great scholar in Tamil Nadu, in Chennai, one of the greatest living scholars of Advaita Vedanta. And he gave a series of lectures on the first 4 sutras of the Brahma Sutras. So it started with the Adhyasa Bhashya, and what you have is an English translation of his, I think his original lectures were either in Tamil or in Sanskrit. He mostly teaches in Sanskrit or Tamil. But we are lucky that S.N. Shastri has translated his Mani Dravid Shastri's original lectures from Sanskrit or Tamil into English, and pretty lucid English. The importance of that third handout is there is a vast literature on the Adhyasa Bhashya. The Adhyasa Bhashya itself is quite difficult. So there have been many masters through the last 1,200 years who have commented, sub-commentaries, sub-commentaries, which I'll mention next time. And those ones, I mean, it's really very difficult unless you are really, into it for years and years to study all of that. But what I find is Mani Dravid Shastri has drawn upon his encyclopedic knowledge of Vedanta and poured a lot of that, many of those arguments in simplified form in that handout. It's about 26 pages long. So take your time with it. It's in the forms of questions, answers, objections, and refutations, and so on. But it all deals with the Adhyasa Bhashya. So these are the 3 handouts. When I read, I will read the original text of the Adhyasa Bhashya, and I will read Gambhiranji's translation. Now we are going to jump into, before we end, we're going to jump into the Adhyasa Bhashya. This was the introduction. We haven't started yet. We're going to jump into the Adhyasa Bhashya. It's good to start reading it. I'll read the first sentence of the Adhyasa Bhashya, and it's the most important sentence. And it's basically an objection against this theory of error. That what you're saying, it's like a rope and a snake. It isn't. It can't be. This is the real world. We are really bodies and minds. We are just these persons. You can't correct it by studying Vedanta and then attain some kind of realization. It's that sounds too simplistic or crazy. It's like saying you are in the Matrix movie. You're trapped in some kind of simulation and you just need to snap out of it. You're in a dream. You just need to snap out of it. That's what Advaita Vedanta claims, actually. And so that's the task before us, to prove it. That first sentence, which we are going to read now, Professor J.N. Mahanti, Jitendranath Mahanti, who was a legendary figure in 20th century Indian philosophy, he taught here in the United States. He passed away last week. He passed away just last week. He was a great philosopher, very learned in both Eastern and Western philosophy. He was a master of Nyaya philosophy, of Vedanta philosophy. He was especially interested in the Adhyasa Bhashya, but he was also a master of Western philosophy. He became quite an authority on Husserl's phenomenology. He went to Germany in Göttingen just after the Second World War, and he studied German philosophy, Kant, Hegel, and all that, especially Husserl. And nowadays you will find hardly any book on Husserl's phenomenology. There'll be at least some citations from J.N. Mahanti. Anyway, that's the background. I met him several times. Once I met him at one of our ashrams, the Institute of Culture in Kolkata, and he told me, I still remember this, he said to me, Swami, in all my studies of Eastern and Western philosophical texts, I have never come across a more profound sentence than the first sentence of the Adhyasa Bhashya. The first sentence of the Adhyasa Bhashya. So I think that's a good build-up advertisement for that. Let's jump into it. I'll read the first sentence, the translation, and start the explanation, and then we'll stop because there's no time. So this is the Adhyasa Bhashya. First sentence. Yushmadasmat pratyaya gocharayor vishaya vishayinottama prakashavad viruddha svabhavayoho itaretara bhavanupapattau siddhayam tad dharmanam api sutaram itaretara bhavanupapatti ityato asmat pratyaya gochare vishayini chidatmake yushmat pratyaya gocharasya vishayasya tad dharmanam chadhyasah tad viparyayena vishayina tad dharmanam cha vishayadhyaso मिथ्येति भवितुं युक्तं तथापि अन्योन्यस्मिन् अन्योआत्मकतामन्योन्यधर्मांश्चध्यस्य इतरेतराविवेकेन अत्यन्तविविक्तयो धर्मधर्मिणो मिथ्याज्ञाननिमित्तः सत्यानृते मिथुनीकृत्य अहमिदं ममेदम् इति नैसर्गिकोऽयं लोकव्यवहारः. Technically two sentences, but should be read together.
Jeez.
Now what does that mean?
Pretty long sentences.
If that sounds incomprehensible, wait till you hear the English translations, even more incomprehensible. And Gambhiranji is a very clear translator. It's the best, most precise English translation available. Let me read out the English translation. It being an established fact that the object and the subject that are fit to be the contents of the concepts you and we, respectively, and are by nature as contradictory as light and darkness, cannot logically have any identity, it follows that their attributes can have it still less. Accordingly, the superimposition of the object referable through the concept you and its attributes on the subject that is conscious by nature and is referable through the concept we should be impossible. And contrariwise, the superimposition of the subject and its attributes on the objects should be impossible. Nevertheless, owing to an absence of discrimination between these attributes, as also between substances which are absolutely disparate, there continues a natural human behavior based on self-identification in the form of I am this or this is mine. This behavior has for its material cause an unreal nescience, and man resorts to it by mixing up reality with unreality as a result of superimposing the things themselves or their attributes on each other. I hope that made perfect sense. All right. A little bit of explanation, and we'll take it up next time. But anyway, just a little bit of explanation. It's not all that difficult, actually. It's a pretty simple idea. The basic idea of superimposition is pretty simple. Just keep the rope and snake example in mind. Now notice, in the rope and snake, two things are mixed up. You can look at it from two ways. You can look at it from the perspective of the rope, or you can look at it from the perspective of the snake. If you look at it from the perspective of the rope, what's happening is, what is really there is being mistaken for something else. What's not there, the rope which is really there is being mistaken for a snake which is not there. So that's one way of looking at superimposition or adhyasa. What's really there is Brahman, limitless existence, consciousness, bliss. But that seems to be hidden, and we seem to think that we are bodies and minds living in a material world. Another way of looking at adhyasa, superimposition, is from the perspective of the snake. It is an appearance, something false, which covers up or which is imposed upon the reality. So the rope doesn't appear, and what we experience is the snake. So from the perspective of the snake, and something false, illusory appearance that is presented to us. So the world, body, mind is presented to us. Now the question here, it starts with an objection. You are trying to pull a fast one on us, the opponent says to the non-dualist. You're saying that it's some kind of illusion, some kind of dream, some kind of like a matrix-like situation, and you just can snap out of it by realizing you're Brahman. You're saying that you, the pure consciousness, have somehow become mixed up with the body-mind. You don't know that you're pure consciousness, you're Brahman, and you think you're body-mind. But that's not possible. Because just like you guys say, you non-dualists, your Drigdrishya Viveka, your Aparoksha Anubhuti, all those texts, don't you clearly say that the self and the not self are so different? You are consciousness, and the not self, body, mind, world, they are all objects. You are like light. The material objects are like darkness. They are like, Shankara uses the words tamah prakashava, darkness and light. They are as different in darkness and light. You are the knower. The material world, body, mind is the known. You are unchanging. The body, mind continuously changes. You are the witness. The body, mind is the witnessed. How can two such absolutely different things be mixed up? A snake and a rope can be mixed up. You can make a mistake because the rope looks pretty much like a snake. And in darkness, it can be mixed up. So how is this possible? It's just not possible. And the qualities of each, the quality of you, the self, is consciousness. Quality means your nature. Your nature is consciousness. The quality of this body mind is insentient. It's an object. It's a thing. How can they be mixed up? And how can you say that I am this body mind if you actually were pure consciousness? And how can you say the body mind is me? It is I. This is the nature of I am superimposed on the body mind is superimposed on me. When we say, who am I? This. What am I doing? I am saying that I am the body mind. And if I ask, what is this? It is I. What am I doing? I am superimposing the body mind on me. I am identifying body mind with consciousness, and I'm identifying consciousness with body mind. We think of ourselves as conscious bodies, conscious body minds. We do not see it separately. We don't see this clarity separately. And the question here is it possible? Is such a mistake at all possible? And the answer would be, you're right. Nevertheless, tathapi, nevertheless, we see it as a fact all the time. All our worldly activities, they all depend on mixing up our real nature with the material body mind. The body mind is an appearance. Remember, why am I saying an appearance? In snake and the rope, two things are mixed up, but the two are not real. The rope is real, the snake is a mistake. There is no snake right there. There may be a snake elsewhere in the zoo or in the garden, but on the rope, there is no snake. Similarly, here it is only existence consciousness bliss. It's not that there is a real world which is being somehow mixed up with existence consciousness bliss. So you're making a huge claim that is existence consciousness bliss is real. The world is not even real. It's like an unreal snake. And you are none other than that infinite Brahman existence consciousness bliss. Is this at all logical? Is it possible? And Shankara says, yes, it's possible. We are mixing it up all the time. If you investigate, you will see all our activities. I am tall. Body is tall. But I say, how can consciousness be tall? But I say, I am tall. I have already taken myself to be the body. I am white or brown or black. That's the body. I am hungry or thirsty. That's prana. I am happy or knowledgeable. That's the mind, the emotions, the intellect, and so on. So I am superimposing all of these upon me, and that's how we work. All our activities in the world, karta, bhokta, jnata, doer, experiencer, knower, I am seeing all of you on the screen, but then I've already imposed body, mind, eyes, all of that on me, the consciousness. Consciousness by itself is not a seer or a hearer or a smeller or a taster or even a thinker. It's only in association with mind, intellect, senses, body that we become knowers of things.
I mean, obviously it makes sense, when you're growing up this entire time, you and the body have always been one and the same. Well, have always done things together. So you're always going to confuse your actions with your body, even though the really strange thing is that you think of this body, your arm and all that as you, but the weirdest thing that we can accept the fact that we can say, when your feet, is this you? It's like, no. Is this arm you? No. But yet somehow we still say that this body is us, is I. Until we lose an arm, it's like, no, that's not me. And whenever I say this body's me, I don't mean the body's me, but it's me. I mean, but yeah, no one really thinks about these things because, well, I don't know why, honestly. No one ever really looks inwards. Everyone is too worried about the external world, I suppose, because they see those things as things that affects them. And maybe that's the reason why inner engineering or looking inwards, introspect, it's never been really a thing. I mean, it makes sense, when you're just trying to survive, feed yourself, get shelter and food. There's no time for that. It's something that Osho has said, and something that Sadhguru has said. When if you're hungry, there's only one problem. If you're thirsty, there's only one problem. If it's raining outside and it's thunderstorming, you need to get shelter, you have one problem. Now, if you have all three, you have three problems. But once those three are taken away, you have 99 problems. And it's very, very much true.
Only in association with body, we
Nerds.
become doers. I will go from here to Central Park. How can consciousness go from here to Central Park? It's only consciousness in association with body, mind, and with legs which can walk around to Central Park. I am, suffering for my past karma. I'm suffering so much. But how can consciousness suffer anything without a body and a mind? It's body and mind, you've done past karma. And the results of past karma are coming to this body and mind. I have somehow mixed myself up with the body and mind. I think those were my actions. These are the consequences of my actions. And not only that, I'm actually suffering. So to do things, karta, doer. To experience pain or pleasure, bhokta, experiencer. And to know things, jnata, even Vedanta, we need this superimposition. This is a fact of our life. But this superimposition also is the source of samsara and all trouble. We need to understand what this superimposition is, and if you thoroughly understand what superimposition is, it will actually go away. That is the very purpose of this Adhyasa Bhashya. Thoroughly understood, it disappears. If thoroughly investigated, it will not stay. Don't worry. You will still be able to do things and know things and enjoy or suffer things, and yet you will be beyond it all. It will help you to transcend it all. All of this will become clear as we go along. A couple of points before I end, maybe just one point. Vivekananda taught this. Many of us may not know. Literally this thing. He was reading from Shankara's Adhyasa Bhashya here in upstate New York, in Thousand Island Park in 1895. Inspired talks of Vivekananda. Let me read, and you will notice it sounds very familiar. This is Vivekananda teaching on Saturday, 6th July, 1895. I just read, and you'll suddenly see it sounds pretty familiar. According to Shankara, there are two phases of the universe. One is I, and the other is thou or you. And that they are as contrary as light and darkness. So it goes without saying that neither can be derived from the other. On the subject, the object has been superimposed. The subject is the only reality, the other a mere appearance. The opposite view is untenable. Matter and external world are but certain states or projections of the soul. In reality, there is only one. And so on. He goes, you will see he's like literally translating from Shankara's Adhyasa Bhashya, but also giving very interesting, in his own unique way, interesting insights into Adhyasa Bhashya, which you will not get elsewhere. Very powerful insight. So there was a whole class on the Adhyasa Bhashya, 6th July, when Swami Vivekananda was there on Thousand Island Park. All right, we'll stop there. We'll take it up next time. Let me see the question answers and see what we can do. Geeta Dev says, what is the difference between karikas and bhashyas? Karikas are usually in verse form, and they can be commentarial also. But a bhashya basically is an explanation of some text. So the bhashya strictly has to explain, for example, a Brahma Sutra bhashya has to explain the sutras, the word by word sutras. That's why there's an objection against Shankara's Adhyasa Bhashya. Why is it a bhashya? Why is it there at all? It's not explaining the sutra. The first sutra is Athato Brahma Jigyasa, and this commentary, the self and the not self, as distinct as light and darkness mixed up. What's it doing? Why is it a bhashya at all? So bhashya has to explain the sutra word by word. And the karika can be many kinds. Like karika can be like Gaudapada's karika on the Mandukya Upanishad, where it explains the text but doesn't do it word by word. It is an independent philosophical commentary. Karikas are basically philosophical verses.
Okay, before we go to the next one, this is something I was going to ask a little bit earlier, but he brought it up now. It's kind of weird how I noticed that when Swami Taratmananda and Swami Sarvarpiyananda, whenever they read the verses of these books or repeat from memory, especially the Bhagavad Gita, which we were reacting to in Swami Taratmananda's videos, why is it always like in a rhythmic form, or like they're singing it? I just don't know. Is that like kind of instinctual? Is that how it's meant to be read? It's like, it's kind of weird. Like, I guess if you imagine if English is not your first language, and then when you start talking in English, it sounds like you're singing a song. It's like, is that how English is meant to be spoken? I'm just kind of curious. I've always noticed that when I'm trying to remember if there's been other parts where they've said it, but maybe perhaps the only reason why these kind of stick out is because it's always in a song-like form when they speak it. I'm just wondering why that is. Perhaps maybe that's always, whenever they've been taught these things, maybe it's always been kind of sung. That way it's easier to remember, kind of like a pattern to it. I guess as humans, I guess the most common thing to remember is like songs. When it's sung in a pattern, it becomes a lot easier to remember. Perhaps is that the reason why?
Could you give a short example how a ritual is explained in the sutras? Rituals are not explained in these sutras. Rituals are explained in the Jaimini sutras, which are Purva Mimamsa sutras. These sutras, the Brahma sutras, deal with the Upanishads, which is the knowledge portion. The ritual portion is the preceding portion. And those rituals are again not like the rituals that Hindus do now. They are Vedic rituals, some of which are continued now, but the upasana, the puja we do of deities, Devata puja we do now, is a more modern form. The Vedic rituals were various kinds of worship of Vedic gods, and with specific fire sacrifices and chanting of certain mantras, Vedic mantras. Gaurav says, the world is conceived in a mind, is private, and the conception only exists in a mind. It's filtered or biased by the human mind or senses. It seems Advaita is saying it's a mistake to see the conception of the world as real or truth. Is this correct? Do Ramanujan and Madhva accept the world as conceived in the mind as real? Not entirely true. Shankara does not say that the world is entirely conceived by our mind and senses. There is some input coming from the external world. And then, of course, our mind and senses throw a layer over it. Because if you say entirely conceived in our mind, our senses, like dreams, it would become what is called subjective idealism. It would become like the Buddhist Yogachara Vijnanavada. They say the whole world is in your mind. We don't say that. We say our individual minds and bodies are part of this world. You are seeing a subjective view of the world, but the world is also existing. The individual body, mind, and the world both are appearances in Brahman. It's not that this world is an appearance in your mind. World, mind, both are appearances in you, the consciousness.
Oh, that's an interesting one. So, if I heard him correctly, let me know, is that in Advaita Vedanta, they're saying that the world and your mind both exist at the same time, versus in maybe perhaps certain Buddhism, or Buddhism in itself says the world only ever exists in your mind. Hmm. I did not know that about Buddhism. That the world, I can understand that meaning, because in our own mind, or whatever we experience is the only thing that ever exists. If you lost your sense of touch, you will never ever experience touch. Your mind will never experience it. So if people touch you, or I guess if you ever feel itchy, that will never be a problem ever again. Which, like, I have been. Ah. But yeah, so you could, the world only ever experience the world only ever exists in your mind through your experiences, which makes sense. I, I I don't remember if it said that specifically, but yes, the world only ever exists in your mind according to Buddhism. But in Advaita Vedanta, the world itself and you yourself exist at the same time. It's not just in your mind. Hmm. There was an interesting. So I guess since this came up and it made me think about it, there was this interesting argument not argument, but discussion that I had with a coworker. He was saying that he believes that everything is subjective, and that this world could be false. I'm saying there's a lot of things that are subjective, but there is an objective truth. And let me translate that. Um, there is subjectivity in the world, but there is an absolute reality. And now I say objective reality in terms of a discussion, but what I mean in terms of Vedanta is absolute reality. So the sheer fact that, and I told him, like, the sheer fact that you're able to think or question anything proves the fact that there's a objective truth, or absolute truth. There's a um, yes, maybe a consciousness at the very least. Like, for example, our world, this existence here, could literally be a computer simulation. It could be the 84th simulation of this thing, making this world a complete false reality. But the objective reality there would be the computer simulation itself, the computer itself running the simulation. That would be the objective reality. Kind of like how in Advaita Vedanta, this world and everything is Maya, an illusion, but the absolute reality behind it is Brahman. And that's the same. That's the translation I was trying to get to my friend. He's saying that he believes that everything is subjective and doesn't know if this reality is true or not, and believes that everything is subjective and everything can be false. And I was just underlining the fact that there is at very least one absolute reality, because we are experiencing this. Now, whether this thing that we're experiencing is false is irrelevant. The sheer fact that we are able to experience or question this means there's an underlying reality. Let me know if that makes sense to you guys. I'm kind of curious. I tried to explain it that way. It may have not gone through, and I'll talk to him about a few things like that too. So we get along for sure, and we tend to agree with a lot of things. But this one, I guess I couldn't quite convince him, because again, just even for me, or I don't know how to keep explaining the same thing over and over again, but just the sheer fact that because we are aware of something, irrelevant if that awareness is a false truth, there's an underlying truth or absolute truth underlying this falseness, Maya. It was really weird. Whenever I talked to him about that, after after the discussion was done, I sat down and I thought about what I said. I'm like, holy crap, that was Advaita Vedanta. Huh. But that's under the assumption um, that everything is subjective. Everything cannot be subjective, or should I say, everything cannot be false. There must be one absolute reality. There's everything, 99.999, everything but one thing can be false. But the one thing that's true would be the underlying reality of everything, which sounds like Advaita Vedanta to me, because Brahman is the absolute truth. and everything else that we perceive in this world is Maya, an illusion, false. So crazy.
Bill, a snake looks like a rope. Does the universe look like Brahman? No, not at all. But this is a big question, and these things will come up next time. Objections against superimposition. Multiple objections will come against superimposition. This idea of superimposition, Adhyasa, doesn't work. Why not? Well, first of all, there must be similarity. A snake and a rope looks pretty much similar. How similar is pure consciousness and this material world? They're utterly dissimilar. And you just said so. See, you walked into the trap. You just said they're like light and darkness, utterly different. So you Vedantins, don't you say the Drig, Drishya, seer and the seen, how different they are? So they are utterly different. How can there be a mixing up, a confusion, a superimposition, a mistake if they're so utterly different? That is one objection. Another objection is the rope and the snake are pratyaksha. They are perceptible. They are things in front of you. You can mistake one object for another object. How can you mistake the subject for an object? That's so strange. That's the second objection. The third objection is that the rope is unknown. Then you see it as a snake. You don't see it as a rope But the self is known. I exist. I know that I exist. How something known cannot be mistaken. If you know the rope as a rope, how you wouldn't mistake it for anything else. So ignorance is necessary for an error. But in the case of this self, I know. I am the self. I am Sarva Priyananda. And here is this world. Both are known. How can there be a mixture?
I guess for that third one, I can see the counter argument for that was that the fact that we can go back to the snake and a rope example. You say, oh yeah, I see it clearly as a rope, but perhaps maybe you have bad vision and you think you see it clearly as a rope, but perhaps it's not a rope, but it is in fact a snake, or you're seeing a snake, but it is in fact a rope. Like, obviously that's under the assumption that, you're looking at it, you think you see it clearly. Again, ignorance or Maya, the illusion itself, is making you perceive it as one way, when in reality is still another. It goes back to the same argument of seeing a snake instead of a rope. But the counter argument would be the fact that no, I clearly see it's a rope, not a snake. But are you sure? Maybe that goes back to the subjectivity of perception. Someone sees a snake, someone else sees a rope. Who's telling the truth?
Then another objection would be, very interesting objection. You see a snake on a rope because you have seen a real snake some other time. Therefore you make a mistake. Yes, we admit this is not a real snake. It's mistaken. The rope is mistaken for a snake, but you have seen a real snake. That's why the impressions are in your mind. And therefore you make a mistake about it. But that means if you make a mistake about it, there must be a real snake in the world somewhere. Similarly, if you're mistaking Brahman for the world, then there must be a real world. Otherwise, where would you get this idea of a world, body, mind, world? Where do these ideas come from if Brahman is the only existence? So these are big questions.
Wow. Yeah.
We'll deal with them next time. Shankara answers all of those in the succeeding lines. Priya.
That's actually, in order us to perceive something for what it is, we'd had to have previous experience of it. Otherwise, we wouldn't know or understand it. But perhaps the counter argument to that is the fact that we didn't originally know what it is, but we've defined it as such, and then we have confused what we define Brahman to be something else other than Brahman. So, for example, the world itself was not known to human beings, and now that we're able to go to space, we can see that the world is round. Absolute proof, or especially even back in the day when they did astrology, is it astrology, or the stars, to prove that the earth was round, and the sun with the shadows. Some people still didn't take that as truth, but with undeniable proof, hopefully I guess some people still don't take pictures and videos as proof, but if you ever go up in space and you look down and see the earth is round, we'd have to have, and then we identify that earth. It's like, this is what the earth looks like, because we don't know what earth looks like originally. So again, it still could be a misunderstanding of what the earth actually is. So we just labeled it as Earth and said, this is Earth. Take it for what it is in terms of what we can observe with our senses.
Kulkarni says we have to admit it's a mistake. Baby puzzled when she discovered she has feet. Amanda says our first introduction to having a body when brought into this world. True, but also remember, according to Vedanta, we are ancient creatures. Even the baby, we've been around many times and many times. So it's just a new discovery of having a body. Priya says desuperimposition is peeling the onion. Yes, that's the next part of it. But first you have to admit that there is an onion. You have to prove that there is a mistake. The dualist, the materialist says, no mistake. Here is a real world. Here is a body. Here is a mind. You are a person and you are suffering. Deal with it. There's nothing to be done. You're trapped here.
Wait, is that the dualist position? It's the fact that, well, that's it, there's this reality. You have to just suffer through it. I mean, even with a dualistic point of view, I mean, shoot, Abrahamic religion is dualistic, and they still do find bliss in their own way. That's what you call Bhakti Yoga right there. But for me, it's understanding. So maybe Jnana, I suppose. It's not true Jnana Yoga though, because Jnana Yoga is showing what you are not. It's a little bit different. It's just more of understanding how the world works, how people act, how things are, and accepting things for what they are, and accepting what you can and cannot change. When you accept those things, life becomes a little bit easier. And maybe that's the first step in my own little path, and that is the first step for my path actually. And it started off with life is suffering. That's the first thing that's the first thing that introduced me into this path that I am following.
It says knowledge of non-self helps remove the superimposition. True, you have to know the non-self as the non-self, not nonsense. Non-self. Body is not the self. Mind is not the self. You have to know them.
Not the nonsense.
Adhyasa Bhashya is a great demotivator. If you stick to it, I'm going to do a very quick look into Adhyasa Bhashya over the next few classes. But if you do a thorough job of it, it can take dozens of classes just to go through 2 or 3 pages of Adhyasa Bhashya. Every line, especially this first line, has so many commentaries, sub-commentaries, subtle discussions. Every word of it has been debated over for nearly 1,000 years because it's a huge, huge issue. None of the other schools of Vedanta or other schools of Hindu philosophy accept this. This what Advaita Vedanta wants to say. So they fight it tooth and nail. They are very straightforward. All the other schools have a simple take on it. You are just this person, a sentient being. There is a God of this universe. Take refuge in God, love God, surrender to God. God will help you out of this. That's it. You can't do anything about it. Where Shankara says, no, there is something even deeper than God, and that's your real nature. And you can investigate it and be free of it right now, right here. In fact, you already are free of it. It's a mistake that you think you're bound. So that's really extraordinary about Advaita Vedanta.
And here he goes again using the word God. Now I've read, I think, the comments from the first chapter because it was just released, but chapter 2 hasn't yet been released during this recording here. In this terminology, I believe he's talking about God as like the Abrahamic gods, as opposed to God in terms of, at least if I remember correctly from the few comments, God is in Brahman. And Brahman, the pure existence consciousness bliss, not Brahma. I believe Brahma being the actual God, then Brahman being pure consciousness existence bliss. But yes, again, that's why it gets a little confusing when he says God and he starts referencing in terms of Western or Abrahamic religion versus when he starts talking about God in terms of the Advaita Vedanta, even though he's not, I don't think Brahman is a god, but more along the lines just existence consciousness. Just a little bit easier just to say God, as opposed to having to keep constantly saying existence consciousness bliss, all of that.
Why do people go to the hospital for treatment of body? Correct. This is Adhyasa, this is classic. This is Shankara would be delighted with you. Body is not you. But we think I am the body. Shankara just said, Ahamidam mamedam. I am this. This is my. I am the body. Or if I'm not the body is mine. Hence, I'm rushing to the ER for treatment because I am in pain. It seems obvious to me. I don't even question it. And Shankara is here questioning it. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Shri Ram Krishna Arpanamastu.
I will say I still like the fact of how it's explained that your true nature is not the body, but you should still take care of the body. It's really weird. I mean, I remember even my own perspective is like, oh, if that's not the real you, then why do you need to worry about all this stuff? That's me. But I start, but regardless of whether this is the real you or not, you still should take care of the body and respect the body. That includes other people's bodies and whatnot. So, and this is what do you call it? I guess you could say kind of like good behavior. How kind of like Sadhguru explains how we take care of the cells because this is our cells. This is us. But what happens if you expand that to other people? The world becomes a better place if everyone can do that to not only just care for themselves but for other people in general. But yeah, and Swami Sarvarpinanda talks about the arrow, which there's two arrows. There's the physical arrow and the spiritual arrow. Obviously, the physical arrow, you go to the ER for physical for physical things, and then the spiritual excuse me, the spiritual arrow, you go to your spiritual leader, whoever that may be, to help you heal your spiritual wounds. And obviously, what is it? Although for me, I guess, understanding that your true self never suffers, there's no such thing as a spiritual healer, I suppose. But it's the sheer fact of the physical that affects you so much because you have this idea that you are the body. So emotional pain, emotional trauma, emotional this and that affects your body, in which you think you're the body. Therefore, it affects you greatly, which has nothing to do with spiritual healing because your spiritual side is never ever harmed, never touched, never affected by it. But because of Maya, you think it is. Or as a matter of fact, well, you think you're the body, so therefore, at the very least, even in Maya, if you believe you're suffering emotionally or physically, you still have to take care of that in the physical realm anyway. Anyways, that's my reaction for Adhyasa. Excuse me, that sounded weird. Sorry. This cough is just lingering forever. That was a really weird noise. I am sorry. Adhyasa Basa. Oh, good lord, I don't know how to pronounce it right. Bhashya Part 1. If you like my content, please consider subscribing. Thumbs up, thumbs down below. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next vid.